Hey everyone, I am Christina. Welcome to the Software Engineer Pros. And for today's video, we're going to do an exciting training. We're going to go over the 10 steps to become a software engineer for 2024. So, if you're someone who's like new to the field, you're looking to get into tech, you're looking to become a software engineer, but you want explicit step-by-step process on how to do it, this is the video for you, okay? This training that you're about to see, this is a pre-recorded training. I've done this training before with my mentorship group. And if you're like, hey, Christina, I didn't know you have a mentorship group. Can I join it? Absolutely. It is completely free. And I'll put the link in the description box below to join. So, and throughout the video, watch it all the way to the end. And if you watch it all the way to the end and you found any value for the training that you're about to watch, please support the channel by subscribe, and share this video with someone who wants to become a software engineer for 2024. All right, so let's get started. And I might have to split screen this, that way I can see the comments coming down below. All right, fantastic. And this is a good note taker as well. So if you're watching this, live, or maybe you're watching the replay, this is a good note taker as well. So if you ever get stuck through your journey and you're like, oh no, I don't know what to do, then you can always refer back to this training, because this training is supposed to give you the step-by-step of what you need to do for your learning, right? Not just learning, but for your transition. Especially for those who are in boot camp or in college or you're self-taught and you're like, all right, what's the next step? What else do I need to do next? So that's what this class is for. All right, fantastic. And then we close all these windows and we should be good here. All right, and once in a while throughout the presentation, I will actually stop and look at the comment section and answer any questions you guys may have. Feel free to drop your questions, or you have a question during the presentation, feel free to drop it as well. All right. Sounds good. Ready to get started? All right. Boom, boom, boom. All right, fantastic. And I'll check the comments once in a while. I'm just going to keep the screen open just in case anyone has any questions. Awesome. Cool. So let's go over this training. So the 10 steps to become a software engineer for 2024. And there you go. So here's the agenda for tonight. So for tonight, I'm gonna put my face here. All right. So for tonight, kind of go over the agenda real quick. I want to cover a little bit about my background. So for those who are brand new to the group and you're like, okay, who's this woman who's running this Facebook group? Why should I listen to you? What qualifications do you have to speak on this? So I'm gonna share my story real quick, like a quick little intro about myself before I get going. And then I'm gonna talk about the 10-step roadmap. So remember what I shared earlier, when we start our series now, we're going to start from big picture, and then as the weeks go on, I'll get into more and more specific training for each specific step. Okay, so for tonight, we'll just do a big picture of the roadmap. And then lastly, we'll host a Q&A session. So at the end, if you've written down questions throughout the presentation and you'd rather save it towards the end, we do have a Q&A session towards the end. Now, if you want to ask a question during the presentation, I will stop once in a while to check on the comment section on the screen, so that way I can view that. And also fantastic. All right, and go from there. Fantastic. All right, I just want to make sure I can see the comment section. All right, fantastic. All right, cool. So let's get going. All right, so I want to do a quick introduction of my story real quick. So you see these two pictures of me. So one was with me in the Army and one I was in Geek Squad. So real quick story about myself, real quick about my transition, become a software engineer. So if you guys didn't catch my name is Christina Beckford. I am the founder of the Software Engineer Pros Facebook group. And the reason why I started this group is because I was in your shoes not too long ago, almost 6 years ago, where I got out of the military. So I was an active duty soldier for about 4 years. And during that time in my life, I was like, listen, I'm ready to do something different. I'm not making enough money. I'm tired of the rough and tough lifestyle out here. So I was ready to do something different. So when I got out of the military, I was unemployed for about 8 months. That was the hardest 8 months of my life. Obviously, anybody who's been unemployed before, you will know. Like you know, right? So I've been unemployed before for about 8 months. And then I decided to, all right, I need to get a job. I know I want to be in IT. So let me just start out working at Geek Squad. So you see the picture on my right with my nappy hair. Um, I was so broke, y'all. I couldn't even afford to get my hair done on a regular basis. That's how broke I was back then. Humble beginnings. All right. So so on the far right, this picture, you see me in my sweater. So I was working at Geek Squad, work at Best Buy for about a year and a half. And all I did there was fix computers. And I want to get a good understanding how to fix computers, troubleshoot them, Windows and Mac. And I was like, all right, this should be like a good entry point to kind of help me start my journey to become a software engineer. So, like everybody else, I didn't know anybody who was in tech in my circle. So I was like, all right, do what we were told our entire lives, go back to school. So I went back to school, got a degree in computer information systems. And then after college, I struggled to get a job for the first year and a half. Like I wasn't getting any callbacks. I was anytime I did apply for something, they'll tell me, "Oh, you don't have enough experience," or like the degree wasn't enough for me to get the job. So that's when I kind of backpedal a little bit, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to have to create my own opportunity. So what I did is I started freelancing. I did some contracting work. I focused on gaining work experience and gaining through those work experience allowed me to put those experiences on my resume. And then when I started to apply for jobs again, then I was finally taken seriously by recruiters. When I go to networking events, a lot of the employers were more interested in talking to me then once I had the experience. So once I did that, I talked to employers and I started out with my first internship at an insurance company. Once I was there for about like a year or so. I switched companies and now I work for Independence Blue Cross Blue Shield. So I started out as a contractor application developer for Independence Blue Cross Blue Shield. And then after like a year and a half, I became a full-time employee. So they gave me a nice salary, a nice six-figure salary as a full-time application developer for Independence Blue Cross Blue Shield. And the rest is history. So, and I've been with Independence Blue Cross Blue Shield for almost 4 years now. So it's been quite has been 4 years. No, I'm sorry, it's not 4 years. I've been with the company for 3.5 years. To this date, miscalculated in my head. So yeah, so that's basically my transition introduction here. Also, she said the glow up. Oh, thank you, Ice. She said the glow up. Exactly. It's like the humble beginnings, right? It's like that's why I tell folks all the time, like, anytime you're switching careers, it's a journey and it's hard. But once you do make it and you like look back on that journey, you're like, wow, like, it's amazing. Like what I said, like she said, it's the glow up. Get better and better. All right, fantastic. All right. All right. You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna grab my I'm gonna grab my phone so that way I can see the comment section. So we're gonna take a quick pause real quick. I'll be right back. I'm gonna grab my phone so I can see the comment section because can't keep switching windows. And then we'll continue. 1 second. All right, I'm back because I'm like, whew, I gotta get my phone real quick. Cause 1 second. All right, I'm back. I see Jenna, Kendra, Barbara, welcome. All right, fantastic. So let's get into step one. Understand the software architecture. So one of the first steps when you're becoming a software engineer, and a lot of the beginners, especially myself, when I was transitioning, is that I didn't really understand, like, all right, like, when you Google and stuff, like, you're like, all right, I gotta learn how to code and stuff. So the first thing what beginners do is, and I did it myself, is we start Googling things. We're like, all right, I gotta learn how to code. So next you know, you start learning a whole bunch of programming languages and tools. You start taking all these classes, and next thing you know, you're like, okay, what type of, like, if I'm applying for jobs, I don't know how to apply as, right? And that was one of my struggles when I first transitioned. It's like I didn't know what type of developer can I be. Like, I learned all these different programming languages and I learned all these things, either from school or what I see from Google, and I'm like, I don't know how one language applies to one area and what language applies to another area of software. So the first step I always recommend beginners to understand is understand the software architecture. Because when you understand the makeup of the software architecture, then you will have more clarity on the type of developer you want to be. So I feel like this is really good for everybody. Feel free to write this down. How you doing, Sonia? Kendra, if you're still on the call here. All right, so the first layer I'm going to talk about is front end. So if you're interested in becoming a front end developer, so what that means is like every application, regardless if it's on your phone, your desktop, like right now you're looking at a presentation through Facebook. Anytime you click something on the screen or you see like a button or design, like a little box, your profile, everything that you interact with on the screen, that's a user interface, and somebody has to develop the interface, develop the components, develop the buttons. When you click on the button, there's functionality that happens when you click on the button. So if you want to be a front end developer, this is someone who does, like, all right, you like doing some design work a little bit, and it's not just designing, but you're implementing the code for the design, then front end might be for you. So that's pretty cool. So that's the front end part of the application. The other part of the application is how everything runs behind the scenes. So if you're like, hey, I'm kind of interested in learning more how the software functions behind the scenes, like, the logic behind the functionality. So for example, like right now you're on Facebook watching this live stream. As you know, there's probably lines of code and commands that allows us to interact this whole way on the live stream. So there is a developer who actually writes the logic, and of course the logic has to communicate with the server for this functionality to work, like the live stream, for example. So if you're someone who's a little more detail oriented, problem solving, critical thinking, where you have to figure out how to get the pieces to work together behind the scenes, that's logic and backend development. All right, so every single application has some type of logic in the backend to get everything working together. So that's the logic and backend. Then you have the most important layer, the data. So every single software application stores data. Every single web application, every app you could think of stores data. And one of your responsibilities as a developer is not only learn how to store data, but learn how to take the data and manipulate it and use it throughout your application. Because let's say somebody clicks on your Facebook profile. What that means is on Facebook, the Facebook app will communicate to the server. The server will go to the database, extract your profile information, and bring it right back over to the front end where you could see it. As an example, as a data is being passed along from the database source all the way back up to the front end. All right, so this is the architecture, software architecture. All right, so any questions on the software architecture or how this works? So we have front end, we have back end, and we have data. And the cool part is, right? So if you're someone like myself, so I'm a full stack application developer. What that means is I can develop all these 3 layers. I could development front end, back end, and data side. Now, did I start off doing full stack? No, that wasn't me. I started out with front end, and then over time I got better developing the other 2 layers. All right. So step one, before you learn how to code, get clarity on the type of developer you want to be. It's super important, and understanding the architecture will help you distinguish what direction you may want to do. All right. So any questions on that? I'm gonna check the comment section. Nope. Okay. Hi, Miss Brown. I see you. Fantastic. All right, cool. I'll go right into the next section. So we're at step number 2. Understand the different software developer roles. All right. So this is probably going back to what I mentioned before in the last slide. Once you understand the architecture and you understand how the software is built from the ground up, now you understand your 3 options. Now you can just pick one. And I tell my clients this all the time, is that it's not about picking the right or wrong developer role. Like, if you start out with front end and you're like, I'm not really feeling it, you can always pivot and do something else. You could do data, you could do DevOps, you can do cloud development, you can do backend. Like, you understand? So I always tell folks all the time, like, don't overthink this step. Just pick a role, just pick something and kind of just grow from there. So, and the good thing is when you select where you're trying to go, once you have a destination, it will make it a whole lot easier to determine what you need to learn. That's the next step. All right. Okay. Let me check the comment section real quick. All right. So Iced asked a really good question. She mentioned, let me go back to this slide real quick. Go back to the slide right here. So Ice asked the question, the line between front end and UX/UI team is not that different. Actually, they are very different. Well, they're like, how can I say this? Like, they're interdependent on each other, Ice. So they're still very different functions, but they're very different functions, but they're interdependent on each other. So for the front end developer to know what to code on the interface, the UX and UI team, their job is to build like wireframes or wireframes or models on how they want the screen or the interface to look. And then once they have like the wireframes and the model, and when I say about models, like they actually take the time to design the buttons and the fonts and how big, like those little details, putting the interface together. The UX and UI do that. And they don't code. They actually use like different software like Adobe, Figma to design the models. And then once the UX and UI team, once they're done modeling and creating the wireframe, then they hand off the design to front-end developers, and they actually know the code. So they'll look at the wireframe and they'll actually write out the code to design the user interface. So that's actually a really good question, Ice. That's a really good question. So for those who are like wondering, like, oh, should I be a UX and UI designer? Like, is that the same thing as coding? The answer is no. They're 2 totally different roles. All right. So great question, Ice. Hopefully that helps somebody else for those who are also wondering. All right, cool. So first step. So going to step 3. All right. So the first step is for you to learn is the foundations. All right. The foundations. A lot of beginners, including myself, I have made this mistake like a million times. Every time somebody wants to be a software engineer, the first thing that they do is that they dive into JavaScript or they dive into HTML and learn a whole bunch of programming languages. And then when it comes down to actually building something, they don't know what to do without the tutorial or watching a YouTube video or without the hand holding. And the reason why a lot of beginners experience this is because they have a lack of foundations. So the first step is before you start learning how to code, you should always learn the fundamentals. It's bread and butter. And the reason why it's bread and butter is because technology, programming languages, and web frameworks, they will always evolve. It will always change. What will not change is the principles, the foundations behind programming that will remain the same. All right. So I tell my clients this too. Like I tell folks this all the time. If you want to stand out to employers, you better have a deep knowledge of programming. Foundations is where it's at. If you're a beginner who has a really good solid foundation of programming, you will naturally stand out above the rest. Besides someone who just, oh, I just went to a boot camp, I just know how to code. Anybody can code nowadays. Even AI can code. It takes another special candidate who can articulate and explain what's happening in their code. That's a whole nother skill set in itself. So that will help you stand out. So so that's pretty cool. So for you guys who are taking notes, this is probably one of the most important slides out of this whole presentation. So if you want to be above average, you must know the fundamentals. And when I talk about fundamentals, I'm talking about computer science topics, programming fundamentals, data structures and algorithm, object-oriented programming. I couldn't tell you how many boot camp students that I have worked with as a software engineer coach. Like they'll go through boot camp, they'll graduate, and then I end up linking up with them at some point, either through the group or I meet them from somebody else. I talk to a lot of bootcamp graduates, and they don't have a solid foundation of object-oriented programming, and that's key to kind of pass the interview. They just know how to code, or they struggle putting applications together because they don't have that confidence. So, and honestly, it's not your guys' fault. It's not your guys' fault for not knowing this. So that's why I'm sharing this with you guys that, hey, if you are going to school, if you are going to boot camp, or even if you're self-taught, please, please, please invest a lot of time in this area. All right. You will stand out more to employers. You have more of a solid foundation in these areas and these topics over just coding. Because like I said, anybody can code nowadays. So that's not always a distinguishing factor. Hope that makes sense. Hey, love. All right. Go to the live chat. All right, cool. Let me get to the next slide. Step 4. Hope you guys are taking notes. So the next step is once you learn the foundations, I kind of threw this one in there because as I was going through my transition and I was learning to build like web applications, one of the things that I did struggle with is I didn't understand the relationship between how the application is communicating with the server. So that goes, like I didn't understand the anatomy of the web infrastructure. So if you guys are taking notes, I highly recommend you guys take some time to learn the web infrastructure. So understanding how the browser or maybe like your application, it could be maybe your application is a web application, maybe it's a mobile app or something. So understand how an application is communicating with the server and how the server is communicating back to your application. So I struggle with that topic because I didn't know what that was. I'm just coding, but hindsight, hindsight 2020, right? Hindsight, I wish I would have spent more time learning this part, web infrastructure. So understanding the different types of web architectures, there's different ways how you can create a system of servers and having multiple applications communicate to the server, and how to use different communication methods that you can use your application can use for. So for example, there's actually a tool called API. If you want to send information to the server, you can use an API, for example. There's different types of APIs like REST, like there's different types out there. So you can use the API, you can use services. That's an old technology. It's called WCF. WCF, it's Windows Communication Foundation. So you can use services to communicate with the server. What's another tool you can use? You can use microservices. So there's microservices where um I don't know how to explain this. I don't want to get too technical on you guys, but the whole point of me saying this is that there's different infrastructures. So this is an area I wish somebody would have told me to study, because guess what? They're going to ask you this in the interview. Plus, you have to know this in the back of your head, because when you're developing an application and your application is a piece of a larger system, you have to understand how the whole system works and also understand how your application can communicate to the server. So that's what this topic is referenced to. All right. Any questions on step number 4? All right. Let me got some water. I'm getting over a cold, you guys. So if I sound a little snotty or something, I'm getting over a cold. All right. All right. Let's get into step 5. I don't see any questions in the comments, so that means that I can move forward. Fantastic. So step 5. So once you learn the fundamentals, you know a little bit about web infrastructure, now we can talk about the coding part. The coding part. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me pause Let me pause 1 second. I just see a question pop in. Miss Brown asked, to get better with APIs, what do you recommend? To get better with it, Miss Brown. So what you can do, Miss Brown, or Kaisha, what's her name? Keisha, sorry. What you can do, Keisha, is first you could go on, what's it called? There's a really good article. So you can first you have to understand how to use the API, right? So understand how to use the API first. Then once you understand how to learn how to use the API, and listen, there's tons of free videos on YouTube that explains how to use the API, what it is, how to use it for your application. I saw this really good video on YouTube from, what's it called? Free Code Camp. Because I don't know if you guys know that Free Code Camp, they have like their own YouTube channel, and they have like a really good video on beginners API. Like it has like a whole course on how to use APIs for beginners, and it breaks like step by step how to use an API. And here's the thing about APIs though, you guys, you have to be comfortable with JavaScript, because in order for you to use an API, you have to know JSON. A JSON is a JavaScript object notation language. So before you get to APIs, at least get comfortable knowing JavaScript. I highly recommend that. Highly recommend that before you even touch APIs, is get comfortable to backend language, specifically JavaScript, because they use JSON for APIs. And it's JSON, and if you're doing more like backend development in another language, it'll be very similar. Server-side code. So first, if you want to get better APIs, understand what it is, have a good proficient knowledge on JSON or JavaScript. And then lastly, you can find YouTube videos on how to implement an API. So you learn by doing. That's my answer. You learn by doing. That's how I learn APIs. I learn by doing. And you can, but those are the 3 steps that I will do to help you like get better, learn how to use APIs. Good question. That was like a really long-winded response, but hope that answered your question. All right. So going into step 5, learn front-end development. All right. So this is like the next steps. Once you learn the foundations, web infrastructure, I recommend everybody starting here. And I know a lot of people would like to say, oh, well, I know I want to be a back-end developer. I know I want to be a data developer. Yes, nothing wrong with with those areas. But when it comes to like, if you're brand new into development for the very, very first time, there's nothing like seeing what you're coding. Like, I feel like when you are able to see what you're coding, it will help you with your learning journey, regardless if you want to be back end later on or data side. Because if you were to start learning how to code, let's say you start out on the back end side. Nothing wrong with that, but from a learning perspective, like a complete beginner, like you've never been exposed to this before, it's going to be very hard for you to understand what's happening, because when it comes to back end development, you can't see the results of what you're coding. It's very abstract. It's very theory. It's theoretical, meaning like you won't know what you have built in the back end until you put the whole application together or you do unit testing. Like it's an abstract way. It's a different way of thinking. So as a beginner, for those who are like brand new to it, I always recommend everybody start out with front end development first, and know the basics, your HTML, your CSS, and your JavaScript. Make sure you're proficient with JavaScript, okay? Not saying you have to be the expert, all right? I've met too many beginners in this group who will spend a whole year trying to be an expert in JavaScript. And I'm like, you guys, just be proficient. Just know just enough for you to get by. You understand what it is, how to use it. You don't have to memorize all the programming languages. You don't have to memorize. You just need to understand what it is, how it's being used, and you can always, Google the syntax. So you have to, you can be strategic about it. So for those folks who are like, oh my goodness, I gotta be perfect. I gotta know everything about JavaScript before I apply for a job. Please don't do that. You're gonna end up spinning your wheels for a very long time. Just know just enough for you to understand how to build it into your application. So front-end development is a great place to start for beginners. Programming languages to learn: HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. It's like the framework. It's like the three foundations. And then, of course, I recommend everybody to learn a server-side code, which is JSON. And the reason why you guys should want to learn how to use JSON is because that's how you can able to learn how to program and learn how to communicate with the server. All right, so super important. All right. And I see Ice said JavaScript finally clicked for me. I don't know why or how, but it just did. Yep. And you know what it is, Ice? You probably practiced it. You probably, once you look at something over and over again and you kind of just do it, it'll click. You just have to be patient with yourself. Anytime you're learning something new, you gotta be patient with yourself. So that's awesome. JavaScript is clicking for you. And the last tip I want to give you guys as well is you do plan on being a front end developer as a role, is please learn how to use a web framework. I was mentoring somebody in the group before, and when I looked at their resume, and they were applying for front end development roles, I looked at their resume, and the only thing that they have on there is HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And I told this person, like, listen, I'm glad you learned the foundations of what it takes to build a front end development application, but you need to learn like a web framework. Like a lot of companies need folks who specialize in a specific web framework. So for those who are asking, like, all right, Christina, what is a web framework? An example of a web framework is Angular, React, Vue, VUE. Like there's different web frameworks. So if you specialize a web framework, you might have better chances of you getting a call back or helping you with a job search. So if you plan on being a front end developer, please do not just put down HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to your resume. It's not enough. For 2024, in this competitive job market, you need to specialize. You need to specialize in a web framework. If you're planning on being a front end engineer, you got to specialize in the web framework. The days of getting by with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript is no more. It's not enough anymore. It used to be back then, like back in early 2000s when MySpace first came out. If you know how to do some HTML and some CSS and make a bed MySpace profile, like it was enough for you to get by. But in 2024, in this job market, every employer is expecting you to know some type of specialized web framework. And it depends on your local job market. I can't tell you, like, hey, everybody go learn Angular. Like, I can't say that, like, because it depends on where you live and your local job market. So if you're doing your local job market research, and let's say the most in-demand web framework that employers are looking for their candidates to use is Angular or React, for example, now you know what to study. All right. So any questions on front end development, what you need to learn, what you need to learn front end development wise and regarding the web framework. Everybody got that? Any questions? All right. If I don't see any questions, I'm gonna keep it moving. If there's no questions, that means I'm a good teacher. Unless you guys already know this. Or it's a good review. Either or. All right, step 5. So once you know front-end development and kind of like my journey, once you get proficient in front-end development, like I know for me during my transition, I was like, hey, well, I'm ready to kind of learn something a little more advanced. Because listen, once you know back-end and front-end, the salary goes up, the opportunity goes up, and there's less competition in back-end. I'm not sure you guys realize this, but there's less like I don't want to say I don't like saying this word, but when it comes to front end development roles, they can be saturated. And what I mean by saturation is that there's a lot more applicants for there's a lot more applicants who wants to apply for front end development than back end. So when I say saturated, I'm not saying that there isn't enough jobs in front end. What I mean by that is it's saturation as in a lot of people want to apply for front end development. That's why I say like, ooh, that talent pool might be a little saturated because a lot of people want to apply for that role. But if you start learning back end and really build up that tool set, then you can start getting away from the masses. And then because I'm talking from personal experience. Once I learned back end development, I never really struggle getting a job. I've hardly ever struggled like switching positions or switching teams or like it's good. Now, when you learn back end development, it will be the most challenging part of your journey. It will be. It was for me. It took me almost a year and a half to really understand back end development. All right. So here are the top programming languages you can learn. And like I said, like you see this list, right? Listen, when you see this list, you guys, it's not just me saying, all right, oh, look, Python's number one. It doesn't mean that everybody goes out and learn Python, okay? Like I always tell folks before, always research your local job market for the most in-demand programming language for back-end development. So for example, I live in the city of Philadelphia. The most in-demand programming language for where I live is C Sharp. So in Philly, there's a lot of companies who use .NET or Microsoft products if for their enterprise applications. So because of where I live and my local job market demand, I have to be more of an expert in C Sharp. There isn't a lot of roles for Python if you live in Philly. There isn't a lot of roles for Go or Ruby Rails. Now, let's say you're someone who lives in, I don't know, California, and you live close to Silicon Valley. Then yeah, I'm sure these companies are using Python. I'm sure they're using Go and Ruby Rails. But it just goes back to you need to do your job, your local job market research before you commit to a programming language. Please avoid the mistake that I made is taking a whole bunch of Udemy courses, learning a whole bunch of tools and languages, and just finding out later on that, oh, I didn't need to learn any of that stuff. I just needed to learn this, and this for my job market. So make sure you do that research there. So learning backend development is definitely critical, especially for number one, the foundations, right? So if you don't have a solid understanding of the foundations, you will struggle with backend development. Like with front end development, you can kind of get by with the basics. You don't have to have a strong foundation to do front end development. Now, once you get to back end development, you will need a solid foundation, meaning you must understand programming fundamentals. You must understand object-oriented programming, data structures. So a lot of those foundations will come back to bite you when it comes to back end development. So make sure you spend some time there. And it will all come back. All right. So back end development is step 5. All right. Step 6. So once you learn how to code front end, back end, naturally we'll get to the SQL side. All right. Now, there are some folks in the group who are like, hey, I want to be a database developer. All right. And one of the most important foundations you should learn when you're talking about databases is understanding what relational databases are. And then once you understand the concept of relational databases, then you can learn the programming language called SQL. SQL. For those who don't know what SQL stands for Structure Query Language. Structure Query Language. And I had somebody, I don't know what it is about the social media and these IT groups. Some people believe that SQL is not a programming language. If somebody tells you if that SQL is not a programming language, you should slap them. Because yes, SQL is a programming language. So if you know SQL, you know how to program for a database. And like I said, SQL stands for Structured Query Language. And you use SQL to write queries or scripts to extract the data that you need from the tables. So learn the relational databases, like the concept of relational databases and the programming language SQL, and that will help you be on your way to be a SQL developer or become full stack. So I'm a full stack developer, so I know all these three. So super critical to any application. Any question on step 6? All right. All right, cool. So I kind of combine step 7, 7, and 8. I used to put these as 2 separate steps, but I was like, I'm just gonna put everything all in one because these are kind of like multi steps, right? So once you learn how to code, you know your foundations. You could build an application on your own without too much hand holding, then you're ready to start preparing yourself for the job market. You can start preparing yourself before you start applying for roles. You can start preparing yourself. So, what I like to tell my clients, and this is exactly the steps that I tell my clients, is hey, number one, evaluate your transferable skill sets. Look at your background, what you already know, and and things about you. Believe it or not, when it comes to the interview for a software engineer, a lot of employers, they're not just looking for people who are super technical. They also want to see if you are a good team player, if you're great at communication. Like they're looking for something unique about you that'll make them say, hey, even though she's a beginner and yes, she knows how to code, but there's this attribute about this person really makes us want really want us, really make us want to work with her, for example. So evaluate your transferable skill set and your background. Could that you can actually leverage that during an interview. So perfect example, I'm gonna use me as an example. So I have an insurance background. What that means is when I was like in my early 20s, I used to sell life insurance. So I understand the insurance business. And I done property and casualty insurance on the customer service side. I used to sell life insurance. So that's like my background. So when I became a software engineer many years later, and I started applying for roles, I actually started applying to insurance companies because that's my background. Like I understand the business of insurance. I added my technical skill sets. I was like, all right, cool. And then we started applying to insurance companies. And that's exactly how I decided which companies to apply to. So, and the good thing is once I got an interview, at one of these insurance companies, I was able to speak on not just the technical side, but I can also speak on the business side because I already had that knowledge back then. And today, I work for a healthcare company. Oh, Independence Blue Cross Blue Shield. For you guys who don't know, they sell health insurance. They sell health insurance. So even to this day, as a developer, I'm still in the insurance industry space because that's like my background. All right. So maybe you guys can do the same thing. So look at your background, look at your resume. If you come from I don't know, like for example, healthcare. If you used to be a nurse, you understand the business perspective of healthcare. You can learn technical skills, and now you can talk about that during an interview. And that's what makes you stand out. That's what makes you different. All right. So don't ignore your transferable skill set. Your background does matter. Your background does matter. Excuse me, I got a little cold. Mm-mm. Leverage your background. Your background can be a huge distinguishing factor about you. Number two, building your portfolio. All right. And I said this before many times. And for those who are new and you don't know this, is that when it comes to building a portfolio, it's not just about grabbing a random project that you got from She Codes. It's not just some project you got from YouTube. It's not just some project that you got from school. All right. When I talk about building a project, build a project that solves a problem and it's a meaty project, like it has substance to it. If you're trying to be a front end engineer, for example, trying to build a full stack front end development application. Don't just build a project where it's just HTML, CSS. That's not that's not really showing your skill set. Anybody can do HTML, CSS. AI can do it too. Like so not trying to speak badly about front end development and HTML, CSS, but the point is that your portfolio should be like meaty. You got some substance to it. So I tell folks this all the time. If you could build projects that are like full stack, like you're building front end, you're using back end, like you're using APIs and you're extracting data from a data source and you're applying it to your application, that's way more impressive to employers because now they can see like, oh, this person understands how to develop from front to back and back to the front, right? So if you're able to show that to an employer, you can develop from every single layer. That's way more impressive compared to someone who just knows like, all right, I just know HTML, CSS. All right. So, and when it comes to your portfolio, make sure it solves a problem. Because when you pick a portfolio project that solves a problem, it's easier to speak on it. It's easier for the employer. Think of it as like a case study. The employer can kind of identify on what you built. What problem did you solve? Why did you build it? What was the solution? And then it kind of helps have like it's a conversation piece. So when you build a project based off of a problem, it makes it like an easier way to present it to your employer. All right. Next step is once you build your portfolio, and listen, back in the day, you could get by with, hey, here's my portfolio. You could take a look at it. Like it's this job market is interesting. As you guys know, the job market is very, very unique in itself. So there was a time where you can kind of just show your portfolio and kind of get by that way. That used to be the norm. But now the technical interview and what employers are looking for now is a little more, they kind of up the bar a little bit, not too much, but they up the standards a little bit more. All right. So and this is what I struggled when I transitioned, right? So I tell everybody this, after you learn how to code, once you have your portfolio, focus on getting some exposure. Get some exposure to work experience. Now, what does it mean to get work experience? Does that mean you have to have a 9-to-5 job? The answer is no. You don't need a 9-to-5 job to have work experience or consider to be work experience. The definition of experience is you have built something. Basically you have done the work. You have done the work. You have some type of proof that you have done the work. So work experience can be being a freelancer. Maybe you could pick up a small project for a nonprofit organization, or maybe you can get work experience from a small business. So there's so many creative ways to get work experience. Maybe you could be a contractor. I was a contractor for the state of New Jersey. I did one of their projects. So there's tons of ways to get work experience to really beef up your resume, especially for 2024. Like this job market, it demands more. And if you really want to stand out compared to the other candidates, it's get some work experience. I wouldn't recommend just, all right, go to boot camp and start applying for jobs. Like that's not always gonna cut it. And you know why it's not going to cut it? Because there's a whole bunch of layoffs. There's a whole bunch of folks who are in the job market right now looking for software development roles. So the best way to really stand out from the masses is to get some work experience. So if you're a boot camp student and you're like, oh, I'm applying for jobs and I'm not getting any callbacks. I'm like, all right, well, it's time for you to it's time to beef up your resume. Let's get some work experience. Well, it doesn't have to be a job. You can do a small project for somebody. You can get paid, or you can get paid and get like a testimonial or review on your resume. You can work for a nonprofit organization, build a project for them. Like just show proof that you can do the work. So you can do that, and that will help you a lot. So cause that's what I did, y'all. Like when I got out of school, nobody wanted to really talk to me. Like my degree, it felt like my degree didn't matter until I got this down. And I had to get creative. I did freelancing work for a little bit, and I also did some contracting work too. So get some work experience. And I'm saying I spend a lot of time in this area because I feel like a lot of beginners skip this step to kind of go from school, build, and then try to get a job. But I feel like a lot of beginners forget about this step. So that's why I'm spending a lot of time here. And lastly, network your way to a role. All right. So I do, you hear a lot of people talk about it all the time. Oh, network, 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 network. And I tell you from experience, networking has helped me get into certain rooms and conversations. You know what I'm saying? So make sure you start networking. And please, please do not wait to the end of your learning journey to start networking. I tell my clients this all the time. Like, you need to start networking from the early onset. Start putting yourself out there, getting to the habit of going to tech conferences, go to a hackathon event. Like, really start putting yourself out there. So that way, when you are ready to start applying for roles, then you have a whole list of contacts that you can reach out to. All right. The worst thing you can do is wait till the end. Like, you wait till your college graduation, or you wait till your boot camp is over. Then it's too late. Cause now you're going to be desperate. Like, when you're networking, you're going to come off as desperate because all you're trying to do is get a job instead of focusing on building that relationship. So, biggest advice to you guys: network early on. Do not wait till the end of your learning journey. Any questions on step 7 and 8? I kind of combine these two steps together. All right. Ice Honey said, oh, I see the comment here. So Ice Honey asked, hackathons, does it count under work experience as well? Yes, it does. I have used hackathons as work experience for my resume, and it does count as work experience. So if you guys have attended a hackathon, it does count as experience. So you should put that on your resume. If you have not been to a hackathon, I highly recommend you do so. So yes, hackathon does count as work experience. That's a great question, Ice. Great question. All right. I feel like I do a lot of talking. All right, step 9. We're going to talk about interview preparation. All right, so that's the next step. So once you have built up your portfolio, you got some work experience, you've been networking, and you've been utilizing your network to kind of start getting into the room. Start getting into some conversations about getting a role as a software engineer for a company. The biggest thing that you guys can do when it comes to preparation is review the fundamentals. And I'm going to keep saying this: review the fundamentals, because during the interview, they're going to ask you those questions. Like, for example, if you're not strong in object-oriented programming, OOP, object-oriented programming, it's very foundational. Every developer needs to know this, regardless if you're front end or back end. Doesn't matter. It's a very foundational principle. So if you don't know object-oriented programming, you should not be applying for jobs until you understand it. You can speak on it. So understanding the fundamentals, be able to speak on it. Number 2, your resume, right? So I think, oh man, I hope I don't get in trouble for this one. I have seen some beginners. I looked at a few resumes, and sometimes I see folks do this a lot. Sometimes is, let's say you guys watch like a Udemy course, just one Udemy course on Angular, for example. You watch the course once, and you're like, all right, cool, I'm gonna put it on my resume. Now, I'm not saying it's a bad thing to do that. So if you are someone who's like, hey, every single time I watch a training video, I will just put it on my resume saying that I know it. Um, ugh. Not saying it's a bad thing, but it may cause problems for you. Number one, anything that you put on your resume, your employer has the freedom to ask you, right? So if you sit there and you put on your resume like, hey, I'm really good at JavaScript, even though deep down inside you're like, I really don't know it like that. I just watched like one video and I never touched it again, and I just threw it on my resume. Like I'm laughing because I've done this before myself. Like I'll watch one video and I'm like, "Ooh, all right, I know JavaScript. Let's go throw this right in there." The problem with that is that the employer has free reign. So whatever you put on your resume, it's free reign for them to ask you any question, regardless if it's super easy or it's super hard, because you claimed that you know that particular language. So 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 please be careful with that habit. It's not a good habit to get into. When it comes to listing out your skill set, like your programming languages and tools, make sure you're able to not only know it, but you have proof that you have used that programming language in your portfolio. You know what I'm saying? Like, gotta have hard evidence. So if you say you know Angular, then you gotta have a project to kind of back that up. You see what I'm saying? So if you put any skill set on your resume, your employer has free reign to ask you any question about that programming language or tool. And number two, you got to have the evidence to back up what you're claiming on the resume. All right. Oh, I like how Ice Honey said this. She said, knowing and understanding is completely different. If it is on the resume, it's fair game for them to bring it up. Exactly. It's fair game. So as you're going through the preparation of prepping your resume and your LinkedIn, this also applies to your LinkedIn as well. Whatever you claim there is free reign. The employer can ask you the question. So just keep that in mind. It's always better to be honest about your skill set than try to come off as you know it, but really you don't, and you trick yourself out, and then you end up getting embarrassed in the interview. So just be mindful of that. Number two, interview preparation is come up with at least like 3 to 5 like situational examples. Because every interview, they're gonna ask you like situational type questions. So you guys know like the STAR method, like come up with examples for the STAR method for each scenario. So make sure you prepare for that. And on the technical side, prepare for anything. Employer may give you a technical assessment. So, and for 2024, it's pretty common now. Like a lot of employers are doing like technical assessments and coding exercises. So, please, please, please do some coding exercises. Get practice with it. Oh, and a fun fact about these coding assessments, right? A cool little tip here. I'm gonna throw this out there. The companies, they're not trying to see if you get everything right. So when you get like a coding assessment, they're not always looking at the number of questions you got right. They're looking at, all right, how did this person respond to the question? They look at each section and they kind of make a determination if you pass like the bare minimum of what they're looking for. So when it comes to the assessment, it's not a pass and fail type of thing. Like the interviewer, they'll look at your responses and then they'll make a judgment based on, all right, we see that this person is struggling in this area, but they're really, really strong with these questions. So we still want to bring them on to round number 2 because they answer these questions really well. So that's a little hint there about the technical assessment and the coding exercises. It's not about pass and fail. Sometimes they just want to see what your strengths and your weaknesses are when it comes to coding. Any questions on step number 9? All right. Ice brought up a good question. Well, it's not really a question, but a statement. I like how she said, I'm so afraid of the coding assessments. Leak code makes me want to change my mind on this journey. Oh, leak code, leak code. All right, you guys. Ice brought up a good point about this leak code. Forget leak code. forget leak code. All right. Because guess what? And I'm telling you from experience. I have spent tons of hours on leak code, tons of hours on leak code. Now, when I go take a technical assessment or coding assessment for an employer, none of the questions that I saw in leak code was being asked by the employer. Like none. The correlation is not really there. Now, do some companies use leak code? Some of them do, but most of them don't, right? So, I guess one of my biggest regrets is I spent way too much time on leak code, and there's other ways to practice coding exercises, right? And there's different ways that employers evaluate your problem solving skills, right? Like sometimes the employer during the interview, they may have you do a technical assessment and they'll do like a live coding session where they'll open up a coding editor, an IDE, a coding editor that may have you actually write code and explain what you're thinking and what you're building, for example. So one of my biggest regret is spending way too much time on leak code because listen, that's not the end all be all. That's not the only way employers evaluate somebody's competency when it comes to problem solving. It's not. I kind of wish I spent more time doing more coding exercises outside of leak code. There's other tools out there. There's books out there that really helps you with the problem solving, how to evaluate a problem. And then I wish I spent more time coding as well instead of be focused on leak code. So forget leak code. Leak code is not the end all be all determining factor. It's a resource. Treat it as such. And guess what? You're never going to know what the technical assessment is going to be until you're in it. You know what I'm saying? So I tell folks to be prepared for any type of technical assessment that may come your way. All right. And I see a question came in. 1 second. Let me pull this up here. All right. All right, I'm gonna take a pause real quick. I see a question here. Let me pull up the comment section. All right. Why is it not popping up here? All right. So I saw a question regarding is better to master one language or know multiple languages? That's actually a really good question. I clicked on the wrong thing. Why can I not view? All right. Okay. Okay. So I see the comments here. So Miss Shiloah, so she asked, all right, should we focus and master on one coding language? Do you agree? Um, it's not just about it's not about mastering like one specific language, it's about mastering a tech stack, so to speak. So yeah, so to answer your question, yes, you do want to specialize in a specific tech stack or framework, so to speak. So yeah, so it's always better to specialize in a programming language. Well, not just one programming language, but a tech stack. Instead of just trying to learn all these different programming languages, because the problem you'll run into is when you have all these different programming languages and you know a whole bunch of tools and languages, when it comes to applying for jobs, you're going to struggle because you're not going to know what you specialize in. And the employer, they're going to ask you, hey, we see you got this long list of programming languages that you claim you know. Which one of these programming languages you feel like you're pretty proficient in? Which one you're more good at than the other? So the employer is going to ask that question. So it's better for you to specialize in a specific area, in a specific tech stack, instead of just, all right, I just know a whole bunch of programming languages. It's not going to serve you well. Because plus it's hard to market yourself as well. Think about how will you market yourself? If you're a jack of all trades, honey, it's how you going to market yourself to the employer? So that's something to think about. And for those who are like, hey, well, what is a tech stack? For those who may not be aware, a tech stack is where it's a set of tools and programming languages that that build an application. So for example, I'm a .NET. I'm a .NET. I know that .NET tech stack, meaning that I build Microsoft technologies, Microsoft products and solution. And in order for you to build Microsoft solution, is you have to know the .NET tech stack, which is front end. It could be whatever it is. Then you have the back end. The back end is C Sharp, ASP.NET, MVC. Like, there's specific tools in that tech stack, and I had to become proficient in that area. So understanding the tech stack is huge. All right, so hopefully I answer your question, Shyla. Shiloh. I'm sorry. I might be pronouncing your name right or your name wrong. All right, you guys. Let's get into step number 10. Nail the interview. All right. So once you prepare for the interview, now it's time for the actual big day, right? Let's say you get to the interview, you're like, yay, I'm in the room. Like we're talking about me getting this role. All right, so here are some tips. Hope you guys been writing it down the whole time I've been answering questions. Biggest thing, make sure you take notes on the interview. That's pretty obvious. Don't be afraid to ask questions, especially during a technical interview. It is a red flag if you don't ask questions, believe it or not. Like it is. Like if you're doing a technical assessment and you're not asking any questions, you pretty much failed. And I learned that the hard way. I went into this one interview one time and I was doing a whiteboarding session. And mind you guys, this is before COVID, where everybody was when everybody was going into the office to do these interviews. So I was doing a whiteboarding session and I didn't ask any questions. And they kept asking me, "Hey, Christina, do you have any questions? Do you have any questions?" And I was like, "No, no, no, I got it." Because the reason why I didn't ask any questions, because I was so fearful that if I ask questions, that means that I don't know what I'm doing. And that's why I thought back then, right? But then I didn't realize that it was such it's a huge determining factor if somebody moves on to the next round or not. So I found out in the end during the feedback, like, "Hey, Christina, we sorry to let you know that you did not get accepted to this role because number one, I didn't ask questions during the technical assessment. And when you're a part of a development team, you gotta be willing to speak up and ask questions, especially when you get stuck, especially when there's deadlines, especially you're part of a team environment. Um, so during the interview, please ask questions. It's not a weakness, it's a strength, and employers are looking for that. All right. Third bullet, make sure you practice articulating software concepts. You gotta be able to speak on what you put on your resume. So if you struggle articulating some of these principles, it's good for you to practice. Do some mock interviews, read some more software development books, listen to coding podcasts. That's what I did. Like how I got good at explaining like different software development concepts, I listened to it over and over. I listened to different instructors, listen to how different people explain the same concept but explain it in different ways. Like you have to get good at articulating these things. And the reason why I say that is because during the interview, they may not always ask you, let me see your portfolio. Oh, take out your laptop. We'll look at your code and then we'll know that you're a good developer. No, they're going by your words. They're listening. They're listening for your expertise. They're listening for it. So if you struggle articulating these concepts, you need to spend more time either reading, do some mock interviews, practice with somebody. What I like to do, I listen to podcasts. I listen to like a coding podcast all the time that kind of go over these foundations. So that way, when I do talk about it, it's like boom, like I already know the back of my hand. Put a little tip there. Um, confidence. Confidence is everything. Everybody knows that. People don't believe me. I have butchered some interviews, but because of my confidence, they still move me on to the next round. Confidence sells more than knowledge. All right. Confidence is everything. So that speaks for itself. During the interview, it's okay to say, "I don't know." All right. That's pretty much common sense for any interview outside of software development. All right. The last two bullets are super important. I'm talking about the salary. We're talking about the Benjamins here. All right. So this is my during the screening phase. So this is before the interview. So before you go to the interview, you must know your market value. Do not go to the interview not knowing your market value, because that's a sure way to undersell yourself. Because these employers and recruiters, they have a budget. They know how much they want to spend on a new hire. So if you tell them, oh well, I used to make 60K at my last job, so I'll be okay accepting 60K. Then if their budget is like 120, then you just missed out 60K because you gave that employer a discount to hire you. So understand your market value. Don't lowball yourself. And there's too many resources out there to help you understand your market value today for 2024. When I first started out, this is a long time ago, you guys. The numbers are different now. Back then, my first role, I made about 50K. That was my first role back then. Now I make well over 120K for my role currently. Because the current job market right now, the value for software engineers is pretty high. Is extremely high. If I was to switch companies right now, I'm sure I wouldn't have a hard time finding a role for 200K or more. Like, it's the value for software engineers is pretty up there, especially for full stack and back end development. So, when I say this all the time, before you go to an interview, make sure you understand your value. All right, drink some water here. All right. Ice asks, what coding podcast do you recommend? I got a whole list, girl. I got a whole list. After this call, I'll drop in the comment section, Ice. If I forget, just remind me, just DM me. But I have a whole list of podcasts. I gotta go through my Spotify and take a look at that. All right. And we're at the end here. So we're gonna a quick Q&A session. I know it's been a little bit over. It's almost 2 hours. I'm sorry, my bad, but it's almost been not 2 hours, it's been a little bit over an hour. So Q&A session. I know you guys have been asking questions throughout the presentation. So if you guys have any questions now, like I mentioned before, I'm an experienced developer. You need clarification on anything. If you have any questions, it's the time now to ask. Cool. I'm gonna pull up this screen here so I can see the comments as well. I said thank you. All right. I'm gonna hang out here for a couple minutes just in case folks have specific questions that they would like to ask. Okay. Ooh. Hi, Moses. You're a new name in this chat. Okay. Moses asked, what to do when stuck in tutorial hell? Ooh, that's a good question. Oh, hold up. I need to drink my water. 1 second. Oh, that's a good question. What to do when you're stuck in tutorial hell? Um, my first question to you, Moses, is, well, first of all, think about why, right? Why are you watching videos over and over and over again? Is it number one, do you really not understand what you're watching? Are you just watching tutorial videos like Netflix, and you're just consuming, but you're not like, so that's like my first question. Like, are you just not comprehending the material, and that's why you're like stuck in that's why you keep watching videos? Or is it number two, you're a little fearful of trying to build something on your own? Because that's the best way to get out of tutorial hell is, listen, I've been there myself. The strategy is when you watch a tutorial, watch one video, and that one video could be, well, maybe not one video, but let's say you do like a course. Let's say you watch like a 40-hour course. You go through that 40-hour course. Once you watch that 40-hour course, do not buy another Udemy course. I do not care if it's on sale. Udemy is on sale all the time, so you're not missing out on anything. But once you watch that one course from Udemy, what you should be doing is you should be building an application on your own. Try to build that same project without the training video. That's the best way to get out of this tutorial hell that you're going through, Moses, because you watching videos after videos after videos, you're not really growing. Like how do you know that you're good at developing if you don't start coding? You're not going to know till you try. All right. Moses says fearful and impatient. I like wanting to know everything in a week. Oh gosh, don't we all, Moses? I appreciate your honesty. I appreciate your honesty, Moses, because I'm sure there's a lot of folks who are in your shoes who may feel the same way. I know I felt the same way. Like when you're in a desperate situation, especially financially, or you need a change in your life, you start thinking like, oh, I gotta consume all this information because this will help me get a job faster. But in the end, it really doesn't. It just slows you down because now you're like, ooh, okay, if I want to practice, where do I start? I watch so many videos, no patience at all. And the thing about software development is that it's a skill driven field, you guys. Um, Software development is a skill driven field. It doesn't matter how many certs you rack up. It doesn't matter how many degrees you got. You can have a master's degree and don't know how to put an application together. Ask me how I know. I've talked to many folks who are in this group who has a master's in computer science and they still struggle to build an application on their own without the tutorial. So that should tell you that it's not just about book knowledge, it's about, being able to do it, So that's why I don't get intimidated. If somebody tells me, "Oh, I got a PhD in computer science." Oh, good for you. Can you build an application? Can you do that's that's basically what the job is. That's basically what the job is, essentially. So, yeah, it's a skill driven field. So you definitely have to be patient with yourself. Keep, practice, Moses. If you can build one small project, Moses, that will work wonders for you. You're going to build so much confidence about your skill set once you build one small project. So, next time, Moses, just pick one tutorial video, all right, and just watch it once, follow along with the video once, and then once you're done with the tutorial, do not get another training video. Open up an IDE. It could be Visual Studio, whatever tool that you use to write your code, and try to build the project without watching the video and see where you are, because you're not going to know what your skill level is until you try it on your own. So that's actually a really good question, Moses, and hopefully this helps somebody who is feeling the same way. Like, oh, I've been watching video after video. Same thing with folks who are jumping boot camps. I was talking to this one person. She went to like 3 different boot camps. And I'm like, why are you going to all these boot camps? Well, I don't know how to build. I don't know. I'm not confident in my coding. And I'm like, well, honey, going to all these boot camps is not going to help you with your confidence. You build your confidence by doing. It's a very simple concept, but a lot of folks believe that, oh, if I just keep taking more classes, or if I keep going to all these different boot camps, and I'm like, it's overkill. It's freaking overkill. It can literally slow you down from progressing if you keep taking all these different classes and boot camp after boot camp, video after video. Like it slows you down after a while. Next you know, 2 years go by and you're still not further along where you're still not further along. So I know I went on a whole rant here, but I did that's the biggest mindset shift we have to make when it comes to this, is that it's a skill driven field. It doesn't matter how many boot camps, degrees, or certs that you have. If you can't build, then they're not going to hire you at the end of the day. So great question. Great question. I know I went on a whole tangent there, but it's super important. Like it needs to be hammered into people's minds that it's a skill. It's a skill driven field, just like in the medical field. It's just like in the medical field. It's not just the knowledge. You gotta be able to do CPR, for example. All right. Any other questions, you guys? All right.